What makes a free person versus a slave? A slave does not own his economic output. It belongs to the master. And even, a serf, you could say, is beholden to the Lord. But even serfs got to keep 75% of what they produced. That's more than the average American. And the average American is lower in status than a serf. Most Americans would have to aspire to raise to the level of a serf. But again, the difference between being a slave and being a free person is owning the fruits of your labor. Well, if the government claims that it owns our labor, then what? We're all slaves to the guy. I told you so, but I told you so. The peace deal with Iran is off and the war is back on. Donald Trump says the ceasefire is gone and the bombs are going to start to drop, I guess, tonight. And, when I first talked about this so-called peace deal and the MOU upon which it was based, I said it was much ado about nothing. The markets were all excited about the end of the war. But to me, it just seemed like a stall tactic because there was nothing really in this MOU. It didn't really have any teeth. There was nothing binding. It was really just a deal to try to make a deal, which they had without the memorandum. But the important part of the memorandum was that during this so-called 60-day ceasefire, that the bombs would stop and the Strait of Hormuz would open up, which was really the reason that Trump agreed to this deal, or a deal to make a deal. It was to open up the strait and to get the oil price down, which worked. Oil prices dropped. They were above $90 a barrel, and they dropped to below $70 a barrel on the fact that, the strait was opening up, although it never fully opened to the degree that it was open before the war, but at least there was some movement of ships. And in fact, Donald Trump talked about why he needed to do it. And he said that maybe we were within 2 weeks away of running out of oil or something like that, and that had he not found a way to end the war, that he risked being the next Herbert Hoover because he was going to preside over a depression. So in other words, we were weeks away from a depression unless Trump found a way out of the war, which is not exactly something you want to acknowledge to your adversaries if you're negotiating. Because if you want to negotiate, you want to do it from strength, not from desperation. Because if you tell the Iranians, if you just hold on for a couple more weeks, it's a depression, that gives them a lot of leverage to hold on. And in fact, I commented on the terms of the deal, and from my perspective, it seemed like Iran walked away the winner because they got all kinds of economic concessions. There was this fund, couple $100 billion fund, whatever it was, to invest in Iran. They were getting sanctions lifted. They were going to be able to sell their oil. And the only thing they were really agreeing to was not to develop nuclear weapons, which is something they had always agreed to. And in fact, Trump even acknowledged in interviews subsequent to the signing of the MOU that it would be unfair to tell Iran that you can't have nuclear power, that you can't enrich uranium for the purpose of generating nuclear power, because it wouldn't be fair because everybody else has nuclear power. So all of a sudden we could trust the Iranians with nuclear power, and even on missiles. Prior to the war, one of the objectives was to completely disarm Iran so they had no more missiles. But then Trump said, well, how can they have no missiles? Other countries have missiles. They need to have some. So Trump seemed to back away from everything that he had been demanding just to kind of create a phony victory out of what amounted to defeat. But even that didn't even stick. We couldn't even make that phony victory last because it's already off. And now Donald Trump is saying, well, I don't even think I need a deal anymore. I can't make a deal, so I'm not really sure what the status is or what they're going to do. But the peace is already off, and we're back at war. Now, the markets reacted to this. The stock market was down I think the lowest or the biggest drop I saw was maybe over 700 points in the Dow. I don't know if we were ever down 800 points. The NASDAQ was down, I think, a percent and a half, but the NASDAQ managed to finish the day positive. I think it was the only stock market index that ended up positive on the day. In fact, I think the reason that money is going into the NASDAQ is just a few tech stocks, the big AI hyperscalers. This is all that's working. It's the only trade that's actually still going, momentum trade. And so everybody is kind of piling in. It's almost as if the tech trade is the new safe haven. So the Dow is down over 1% today, about 570 points. Small caps were down about 1%. Gold was down. Gold continues to react to war news, escalation of war, as if it's bad news. And at one point, I think gold was down maybe 70 to 80 bucks at the lows, but it didn't get below 4,000. So 4,000 is holding. Gold recouped a lot of its losses to close down just about $30 at $40.74. Silver also down on the day, but holding closed at $58.13, down $1.71. But it's not, wasn't down $4 or $5. So I think silver and gold are holding into support levels, and I think we're getting close to an inflection point where war news stops being bearish for gold and silver and starts being bullish, because it is bullish. The markets just don't seem to get that, but the uncertainty surrounding war is bullish. But more important, it's all the extra money that we print, all the inflation that we create. And I'm not just talking about oil prices going up. And oil prices did rebound. And in fact, I think they're headed a lot higher. Right now, they closed the day up about 6%, just below $75 a barrel. But I think that this rally is going to have bigger legs. I think it's going to be pretty clear to oil traders that no matter what happens, this war is not really ending and the strait's not really reopening. Maybe it won't be shut airtight. Maybe a few ships may be able to come through, but not nearly as many as used to come through. In fact, ironically, it seems to me that our main goal right now is just to restore the status quo. That would be a win, just to return the Gulf to the situation it was in before the war started. That's like the best we can hope for. Only even if we achieve that, it's going to be at a massive cost, because I think oil prices will still be much higher as a result of what happened. But more significantly, and not just the loss of lives and the loss of property, and there was a lot of property loss, not just in Iran. We lost, our bases in the Gulf, we lost property too. But the money that we have spent on the war, that we are continuing to spend on the war, and if we ever get a peace, that's going to cost too. We're going to be spending a lot more money. I'm even reading now official estimates that the Iran war is going to cost over $1 trillion. And again, I said this on day one, forgetting about this peace deal. The day that Trump decided to declare war on Iran without Congress, and I criticized that as an undeclared, unconstitutional war. Had Biden done this, the Republicans would have been saying the same thing. But because it was Trump, the Republicans didn't care. Most of them anyway. I mean, Rand Paul, made a big deal about it. Thomas Massie, and now see what happened to him, right? His seat is gone. But apart from the constitutional aspects of it, when this war started and Trump was talking about how quickly it was going to be over, how we were going to kick Iran's ass, we had the greatest military in the world, thanks to him, that he had built up this great military and that we were going to make short work of Iran. It was going to be liberation in Iran, just like we had a liberation day. He was going to liberate the Iranians from their corrupt government. It was going to be a total regime change. And all this was be accomplished